for having me. It's very cool that such an international group of people here. I'm just going to attempt to remember how to share my slides in Teams because thankfully I haven't had to do too much of um, screen sharing these days. Hang on. I think it's this one.
On right hand top side, when you see the red button leave, if you go back left, share, and then you open that.
Okay, I think it's maybe this one. Goodness gracious, that's it. All right. So can you see that? Any chance?
Yes, I can see that.
Yes, amazing. We can see that.
Oh, good. Cool. So my research examines how community-based music activities can be deployed to facilitate active citizenship, shared identities, cohesion, and sense of belonging. So this seminar is going to explore this in the context of individual English locales, which is, of course, where I'm based, through a series of case studies which represent varying ways music activities can increase active citizenship and the other things I mentioned. I will draw on a curated program of interventions and collaborations that were co-created with non-academic organizations and in the context of increased arts funding in the UK. So for context, over the past 15 years, England has undergone a gradual but deliberate devaluation of music through drastic reductions of school music provision, a slashing of arts funding, and an aggressive anti-arts as a career narrative coming from the government and echoed by national media. This little thing in the right-hand corner was put out by our Prime Minister at the end of the pandemic, encouraging people to change careers. So devaluation processes run in tandem with economic downturn and a widening of the wealth gap, reduction of government services, and an increased anti-immigrant rhetoric. I maintain that instead of removing music and the arts, it can be used as a tool to build citizenship and sense of belonging. So I'll provide an overview of the disciplinary approach that I use in case anyone's unfamiliar with it, applied ethnomusicology. Then I'll outline the case study interventions that have formed the backbone of my research. And finally, I'll provide a comparative analysis of these case studies, extracting the ways in which music worked to develop non-musical competencies and aiding in addressing individual community needs. So my approach of co-production and co-creation enables music interventions to address issues at the heart of communities. Moreover, it suggests how music outreach research in collaboration with local community music practitioners advocates for and expands the reach of activities, resulting in demonstrable impact within their specific localities. Ultimately, my research explores how grassroots music activities can contribute to bolstering local engagement, cohesion, and building healthy communities. My research is situated around the program of experimental music interventions, or a program of experimental music interventions falling under the broad aegis of the Cohesive Harmonies project, with each intervention aiming to explore place-based solutions through music. There we go. So Cohesive Harmonies is positioned within the discipline of applied ethnomusicology, which adds a practice-based element to ethnomusicology, which is, of course, the study of music in and as culture. So the applied part of this emerged in the last couple decades when ethnomusicologists began asking, how can we use our investigations to make a difference for the people that we work with? It puts music cultural research to practical use in various contexts, academic and otherwise, including education, cultural policy, conflict resolution, social improvements, and community music. So projects are guided by principles of social responsibility and change, human rights, and cultural equity. There are several angles these projects can take. So one being conservation, so preserving and protecting music cultures, for example, making records of disappearing indigenous music and language on Easter Island or Rapa Nui. Advocacy, so using music activities to advocate for aspects such as community needs and social justice. Education, so just improving the lives and prospects through music-related education. Social cohesion, projects that use music to build bonds between disparate groups or communities. So the methods are similar to those of ethnomusicology, making use of ethnography, participant observation, interviews, that sort of thing. However, it's also typical for an applied study to include some kind of intervention, so an event or series of events initiated by the researcher in collaboration with communities or organizations. Essentially, instead of the researcher inserting themselves into a scenario which forms the object of research, the research environment's created. In addition to written outputs, the research findings are also communicated through non-academic channels such as public lectures, museum exhibitions, documentaries, and government white papers. So my transition from ethnomusicologist to applied ethnomusicologist occurred as a result of attending a Musicians Without Borders 5-day music leadership training, similar to the one that Mananita attended. I attended mine in February 2020. MWB is an international NGO that facilitates music outreach programs in various global conflict and post-conflict locales, such as Palestine, Kosovo, and El Salvador. MWB works to effectuate nonviolent social change via sustained musical interventions, and their 5-day training series trains practitioners in skills necessary to develop and deliver music outreach interventions in post-conflict communities, as well as with other vulnerable groups such as asylum seekers. As a side note, over the last year, I've collaborated with MWB to host their training series twice a year at my university, and we'll be doing so again next year if anyone is interested in attending. Although the training was intended to springboard a sort of European-based refugee music outreach project, the pandemic pretty much decided that that wouldn't be happening for me. And I was inspired instead to construct a UK-based project that encompassed the activities and values espoused in those trainings. And what emerged was my project, Cohesive Harmonies. So this is a program of interventions, as I said, situated in the field of applied ethnomusicology. And underpinning this research program is my training and ongoing collaboration with Musicians Without Borders. The project investigates the capability of music activities in facilitating active citizenship, shared identity, and social cohesion, the impact and importance of network creation amongst practitioners in this field, which is often an isolating profession with very little official training available, and how the use of creative and qualitative research methodologies can aid in the development and success of socially oriented music initiatives. The project was also inspired by stumbling upon the 2019 World Health Organization report that says, what is the impact of arts on health? The report defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or immunity, which situates health not only within the realm of the individual, but more broadly within society and culture. The 100-plus page report presents various case studies that mostly focus on physical and mental health, though largely neglecting the concept of social health once it gets into sort of the case study bit of it. I wanted to create a project that built on the report with a focus on the sort of social side, so active and active citizenship, which describes the traits that belong to a person who feels engaged and included within their local communities, and also building non-musical competencies, which are skills, traits, and benefits that aren't music as a result of participation in music activities. So the locally envisaged initiatives that make up Cohesive Harmonies take two research design frameworks towards project creation. Firstly, by creating interventions from scratch, which involve local organizations but are conceived by the researcher, myself in this case, to experiment with particular musical approaches. And secondly, through collaborations with non-academic entities where initiatives are created within their existing framework to accomplish specific organizational goals. So I will describe two projects for each of these approaches. So for this first approach, I'm going to describe two case studies that I constructed in my hometown of Bradford, West Yorkshire. So Bradford is, they're on the map, kind of actually right in the middle of the island practically. Bradford's a large post-industrial city in Yorkshire with the poverty that is often associated with these types of places after the mills and the mines closed, which was in the kind of 80s. It's very multicultural, including large South Asian communities and asylum seeker populations as well. Social issues are exacerbated by it also being divided along ethnic and geographic lines. Resulting in undercurrents of mistrust and tension. The two projects I'm going to discuss were conceived as pilot initiatives which addressed, broadly speaking, social cohesion. So the first one was Virtual Harmonies. This was developed in collaboration with Emma, who's a trainer for Musicians Without Borders, and Touchstone Bradford, which is an interfaith arts charity. The charity's remit. Hang on. Computer. So, sorry about that. So the charity Touchstone's remit is to bridge social divisions and bridge inter-community trust by bringing women from different faiths and cultures together through short-term arts initiatives. My initiative, Virtual Harmonies, ran during the COVID-19 lockdowns, and hence the name took the form of online songwriting workshops. So here my aims were to explore how accepted music tactics for building intercultural trust can be proactively deployed in a post-industrial multicultural community, and to explore these methods in a virtual setting. The workshops were situated around creating a music video, which incorporated songwriting, audio and video recordings of the participants, and images that reflected the theme of the lyrics they would write. With limited time in the workshops, Emma and I decided to set a theme for the participants to songwrite about, and we chose the topic of swifts, the birds, who are remarkably resilient and spend most of their lives in the air migrating from southern Africa to the UK every year. So we structure the 4 workshops around different elements necessary for the final video, but oriented around collaborative activities, which would be typical of Musicians Without Borders trust building workshops. So the first session centered around creating a song melody. We gave the participants homework to use craft materials from a welcome pack to create a backdrop, which you can see here, which would be used in the video. The second session was focused around writing the lyrics for the song. The third was creating rhythms to go along with the lyrics, using household items to create a groove. And session 4 was dedicated to adding movement, which would be incorporated in the final video. Participants were paired up and created coordinated movements, which were then shared with the whole group. And the final product was watched in an online viewing party. And if we have time at the end, I can show you the video of that because it's lovely. Post-session interviews and surveys were incredibly positive, with participants saying they felt empowered and they did not know they were capable of musical product, and also created positive connections between them that have since led to real-life connections as lockdown restrictions lifted. Participants also valued the opportunity to collaborate and bond with people they wouldn't necessarily have encountered outside of the sessions, while having the opportunity to impart their individual character on the project. Preliminary collation of research indicated that the cohesion building techniques did transfer online with some amendments and were effective in encouraging intercultural communication, which then transferred offline. The sort of tasks that how you would online had to be very specific, more so than in person, and they of course took a lot longer than they would have in person. While the overall group participants can be as large as one would have as an in-person class, the in-class activities are more effective. Online, it was more effective in groups of 2 or 3 because when people start talking, it got confusing. So in 2022, it became possible to build on the research from this project with a follow-on initiative more specific to the lived experience of several of Bradford's larger culture groups, and that involved the Dole drum. This was entitled, quite creatively, the Bradford Dole Project, and it explored how multicultural significant instruments, such as the dole, could be effectively deployed in locally envisaged music interventions to foster cohesion, non-musical competencies, and shared local culture in this disparate community. The project consisted of 3 dole workshop series, 2 with Touchstone again, and 1 with Stand and Be Counted, which is a performing arts charity whose work focuses around asylum seekers. So for context, doles are large barrel-shaped drums from the Punjab region of the Indian subcontinent. And this region was one that bore the brunt of the 1947 partition when it was divided by vacating British colonialists into East and West Punjab, which is now India and Pakistan. The dole was an important instrument in both folk and religious traditions in this previously multicultural region. And after partition, the drum held its significance to both sides and evolved in different ways, as well as in the emerging diaspora groups in England. So in Bradford, the dole is a significant emblem across the city's largest ethnic minority groups. It's also sonically and visually familiar amongst those without direct cultural experience of the instrument due to, firstly, its usage in the British Bhangra genre, and secondly, in its prominent presence at private events such as weddings, as well as civic celebrations. So the Bradford Dole Project is a collaboration that emerged from noting the many cultural contexts in Bradford that the dole touched. Community interviews revealed that the dole, while still a prominent cultural symbol, was becoming less popular among younger performers, with voiced fears that dole expertise could disappear. Thus, there was a desire to expand its usage into new communities and genres. The Bradford Dole Project's aims are to utilize cross-cultural interventions to bridge community divisions by creating shared sonic and material meetings, introducing people from different cultures and genders to the music and the instrument. Oops. Sorry, I didn't mean to play that. And developing methodologies to evaluate how musical activities can promote cohesion and inclusion across diverse communities. And that, for references, I wasn't actually going to play that, but this is what we taught them in these workshops. And that beat is kind of the most recognizable beat in British Bhangra music, so it's really familiar to people. So the project explored 2 different strands of social cohesion. Firstly, interfaith cohesion, involving women, again, from across Bradford's religious groups. Here we ran 2 workshop series with Touchstone at different times of the year. And secondly, cohesion and inclusion between asylum seekers and local communities, working with SBC, again, the Performing Arts Charity, using the dole as a way for asylum seekers to interact with people from outside of their immediate situation. In the UK, asylum seekers are forced to live in hotels, basically, as well as engage with an instrument that was culturally significant to their new city. The basic workshop structure is to introduce participants to dole playing techniques, learn its most recognizable beat, which I just played you, connect with different tones through sound drawing, and to learn to improvise on it. So 2 key observations emerged through these workshops. Firstly, different participant groups recognize different things in the dole. Secondly, participants fostered these non-musical competencies that contributed to longer-term goals of cohesion, inclusion, and shared culture. With regards to the first observation, individual participants voiced different points of recognition to the dole. These included direct cultural links, indirect familiarity with the instrument where new understandings were facilitated, and unfamiliarity where new meanings were assigned. With regards to these direct cultural group, or women from Pakistani backgrounds who had cultural familiarity with the instrument already, but had never played it. For example, a woman named Saima voiced that all through her childhood, it had been her dream to learn the dole, and it provoked nostalgic memories of time spent in a Pakistani village. Other Touchstone participants were outsiders to the dole, but had local and popular culture-related associations with the instrument. For these, greater connection came from gaining an understanding for an instrument they had previously viewed as a cultural outsider. And in the cases of those non-Muslim participants, learning the dole allowed them the opportunity for insider knowledge and experiences of an instrument they had some familiarity with due to its local significance, and therefore lent a feeling of closeness to the culture it was a part of. With the SBC participants, the power of connection to the dole emanated from a less tangible place. None of the participants had direct cultural familiarity with the instrument, nor were they from Bradford. So new meanings came from positive associations from home. For example, a Syrian man reminisced about seeing it in Bollywood films, while a Rohingya woman saw similarities with a typical drum from her musical heritage. With regards to the second observation, participants developed competencies that, although not directly related to the dole, aid with longer-term goals of cohesion and inclusion. 3 primary competencies emerged. One was confidence, next self-expression, and then English language pedagogy. So with regards to confidence, I conducted, after the workshop, I conducted several interviews, including one with the leader of the group, or the facilitator of the group, Rosie. Rosie had previously noted that her participants were quite shy, and she observed that drumming had improved their confidence and playfulness. She noticed their ability to have fun together emerged in our workshops, where they typically had stayed kind of in their own groups. With the touchstone participants, a confidence emanated from learning something new that they had previously thought impossible. One participant reflected that the dole was a huge part of my culture growing up. Traditionally, dole playing is something that the men did, but it's more acceptable for women now, and is something I would want to move forward with, having a little bit more confidence in my abilities. So with the second competency was self-expression. The dole sessions provided alternative forms of self-expression for people, including an improvisatory element, increased creative agency opportunities, as well as building musical competence. Improvisation was presented as a kind of no wrong answers exercise, which allowed people the freedom to do what they wanted. It was an important aspect of building confidence to express themselves through rhythm. Also enabling self-expression was the sound drawing, which is we gave people a piece of paper and we had them draw pictures related to particular dole tones, and there was a few pictures of that on a previous screen. So some touchstone participants drew detailed pictures of nostalgic sonic-inspired scenes, while with SBC, Rosie just marveled at how the group was immediately at ease with something they'd never done before and understood it as an alternative form of communication. So the final theme that emerged was English language pedagogy. So lack of English proficiency is a barrier for asylum seekers engaging with host communities. Obviously, SBC's belief is that creative spaces are effective places to learn English, especially for those unaccustomed to classrooms. Creative activities that remove the need for writing and speaking necessarily allow them to feel they're communicating and often encourage them to speak English more. And this was demonstrated in the dole workshops, with Rosie noting that participants were communicative and outgoing more so than usual. And that was something that carried over into sessions after we'd finished working with them as well. And again, it's hopeful that this will help them lead to greater feelings of inclusion in Bradford. So research derived from the Bradford Dole project revealed several key findings. Firstly, that shared cultural experiences surrounding musical instruments were a powerful tool for building rapport in these multicultural arenas. The collective learning experience created a bonding opportunity from which new cultural meanings emerged. Secondly, the dole evoked different meanings for different individual participants, depending on cultural background, but also creative alternative cultural significances. Thirdly, creative empowerment occurred at several levels. Firstly, all participants were, in some capacity, outsiders to the instrument, either by culture or gender. The workshops enabled the accruing of insider knowledge. Secondly, collectively going from knowing nothing to relatively quickly playing and improvising as a group was quite empowering. And thirdly, empowerment occurred by the creation of a common language and room for expression by the sound drawing and improvisation. Finally, the dole workshops provided an avenue for greater cohesion and inclusion. This occurred within the groups themselves, but also through facilitating the improvement of non-musical competencies and providing all participants an insider insight into an instrument with a strong Bradfordian symbology. Overall, these two researcher-driven interventions represent different ways music can build social cohesion, as well as other non-musical competencies through musical interventions. Obviously, there are positives and negatives to this sort of framework. On the one hand, interventions can be a bit more experimental and tailored towards specific avenues of inquiry. On the flip side, due to funding and staffing limitations, these have typically had to be, for us, short-term projects where recommendations are provided to the collaborators for them to take forward as they see fit. So in response to this sort of flip side of this, the negative bit of that, I'm at various phases of developing projects that take a different framework angle, and that is what I call organizational driven initiatives. And the two projects I'm going to talk about with that I've got in sort of various stages of development are collaborations with Dorset Music Service, which is in Dorset, which is on the south coast of England, and Soundwave, which is in West Cumbria. So my collaborator at Dorset Music Service is a lady named Peely, who's on the senior leadership team there. So for reference, in the UK, a music service is a public sector entity that's part of the council and delivers music activities in schools, community centres, and other public spaces across the county or region. While the music service is well respected within the region of Dorset, it's investigating ways to expand the reach of their music activities and demonstrate music's utility not only as a specific creative outlet, but also as something that could be used in other classroom contexts as well. This element is a source of our collaboration. From a research standpoint, one of the things I'm interested in developing is methodologies for tracking impact of music on communities. And Dorset presents an interesting location to start building this. So it's located, so here, south coast of England. It has the reputation of affluency because we've got a perceived and actually quite real north-south economic divide in the country. While there's some truth to this divide, actually quite a lot of it, Dorset is also, as so many places, a divided region. There are areas of high incomes, which are above the national average, but also 11 of the wards, which are sort of sub-counties, fall within the top 20% most deprived neighborhoods in the country. So the levels of deprivation have adverse effects on health and well-being. It also creates cohesion concerns between the rich and poor areas. So my interest in working with this area is in part the disparity levels, but also the relative isolation in terms of being able to track the impact. It's also quite difficult to get to. Public transport exists, but is really limited. There are no airports in the county or even a motorway. The location, while contributing to issues of rural isolation, again, was sort of attractive to me almost because of the isolation, as for examining the impact of music activity. So upon an initial site visit, it became apparent that there was a really good project that could emerge, which would have both implications for arts engagement research, local impact, and a potential for influencing national education policy. One of the highlights of the visit was watching my collaborator Peely deliver two 90-minute training sessions for emotional learning support assistants, which are ELSAs, what they call, in Livingston, which is a really affluent town, and also Chickerell, which is a very deprived area in the county. So ELSAs work with children who require extra support in schools for a variety of reasons. Peely's sessions were pilot programs to demonstrate how they could use music activities, how the ELSAs could use music activities as part of their existing toolkit. There are usually several ELSAs in each school, and their work does not typically involve music. The overall aim of the workshops was to give them an introduction to how music activities could support their work with both individual and group sessions. This included theoretical and practical elements. The theoretical concepts outlined the concept of music activities to regulate emotions, behavior, develop cohesion, and provide a form of expression. The practical elements presented activities that ELSAs could apply with their pupils, as well as introduce them to online resources they already had access to through the school system, which could also be used for this purpose. Initially, what was exciting to me about these sessions was Peely's direct usage of some Musicians Without Borders concepts, having attended one of my trainings last year, notably the Mates Keys, which I'm sure you'll hear a bit more about, because I think Darren is coming to talk to you in December. But that is basically mind, air, trees, expression, and stretch. And these provide a framework for understanding brain regulation and trauma responses, basically. So Pelia had given the ELSAs very clear, simple exercises, which tied to each element of that framework, geared towards helping students from a place of dysregulation to a focused state. These practical activities were demonstrated amongst the group. The schools also have access to a variety of online musical resources, such as simple music writing software and activity ideas. She spent some time in the session showing participants how to adapt these to their purposes. But in conversations afterward, the idea behind a side project began to emerge. Peely had already begun to receive positive feedback from the sessions that I attended. Several had emailed directly saying they'd used particular practical activities with their students to great effect. The rest had filled in an online feedback form at the end of the session and listed as many activities as they could remember that they'd used with their groups and the ways in which those had been effective. Based on the positive feedback from these sort of pilot trainings that she's done, Peely and I decided to work together to develop an initiative based around this ELSA musical training. These would be informed by follow-up surveys and interviews with previous attendees regarding what they found the most useful and what they wanted more practice on, and also what further musical content they could benefit from. I'm in the process of setting up a feedback and impact tracking system that will run in conjunction with the trainings. We'll run an expanded series of trainings for these ELSAs in the catchment area of Dorset Music Service. This is going to firstly include an introductory workshop version, similar to those I witnessed Peely running. We'll also develop a round 2 training session, and that will give them the opportunity to expand their skill set and perhaps deliver exercises to the class to build confidence. Next spring, after the completion of this more developed round of trainings, we're going to host an in-service day for all the ELSAs who participated in trainings to allow them a space to present and share with each other how they've incorporated and adapted the music activities to their own practices. An important addition to the project is the collection of impact-related data. Currently, these trainings run sporadically with some initial post-workshop feedback forms, but no other follow-up. I'm in the process of setting up some interviews, which are going to be next week, I think, in a week and a half, in Dorset, designing to help design this follow-up feedback or the follow-up project. This comes in the form, so we're going to do short interviews, surveys, and feedback forms to collect and analyze what from the training was being used, what difference they'd been seeing in their students so far, and changes in student behavior outside of the sessions. The information is then going to be collated into a case study and educational policy white paper that will be presented as a model to other music services around the country. This intervention's impact lies in its capacity to influence Dorset Council's educational policy, as well as hopefully other councils in the region. The project's obviously aimed primarily at school-aged under 18 children, and as a byproduct of the ELSA trainings, their activities will develop non-musical competencies in their pupils centered around self and co-regulation. In a school setting, we anticipate that this will result in an improvement in educational outcomes and participation by the students. In a broader sense, this will support research about how kind of information gleaned from Musicians Without Borders trainings can trickle down to improve local well-being as well. So the second collaboration in this organization-driven approach is with a different Emma, who works for an organization called Soundwave. This is a charity that provides music lessons and sessions across West Cumbria. So West Cumbria is up there at the top. That's basically, that's the border of England and Scotland, more or less. This is a charity that provides music lessons and sessions there, mostly to youths aged 5 to 25, but also with an adult choir and performance series. In addition to extracurricular offerings, they provide most of the school-based music activities in the region. I chose this as a case study for several reasons. Firstly, the location is pretty unique. So West Cumbria encompasses the northwest corner of England, sandwiched between some of the more impressive mountains of our Lake District and also the Irish Sea. It's a really large area, but again, very, very isolated. The roads are very small and few. Again, no airport, and the train service is unreliable. The region's main industry is the Sellafield nuclear power plant, with a high proportion of the population working there and an overwhelming focus on the STEM subjects in local schools. It's basically a long way from everywhere. It boasts both high salaries, some of the highest in the country, but also high areas of deprivation. It has the second highest salary in the country after Chelsea in London. But yeah, also most of the rest of it is the most deprived areas in England. And Soundwave is the only music provider in the region. So while it is quite monocultural, white British, there's an increasing number of asylum seekers placed in hotels there, which also has the potential to create some friction. The isolated nature of Soundwave's working area and means that they are uniquely placed for measuring impact of the arts there, since, again, no other music organizations in anywhere nearby. They also had an interest in finding ways to measure their impact outside of the classroom. Upon visiting Whitehaven, which is one of the larger towns there, it became more apparent that this would be an organization to partner with, because Emma was also in a position to implement change. The isolated nature of the location and the fact that it's primarily made up of small, not very connected towns means it's more possible to track how arts activities change particular locales. And in conversation with Emma and her colleagues, a project began to emerge, situated around three primary themes. One is reviving the high street. So Whitehaven, like a lot of locations in the UK, has a high street primarily made up of closed shops or betting parlors, despite its stunningly beautiful location on a harbor. Soundwave has just moved their main offices into the city center of Whitehaven. So we're going to collaborate to track how we can to track the social impact of including more live music activities in the area. So the second angle is the development of an arts-based deindustrialization strategy. So Sellafield is going to be closing one of its reactors and thus drastically reducing its workforce. What we're going to try to do is collaborate on proposing an arts-based deindustrialization strategy, which is something that the council has already expressed at least a passing interest in. And thirdly, we're going to track the impact of their existing activities using qualitative research to help track the community impact of what they're already doing in schools. So the primary needs at Soundwave are kind of tied to the location. They want the region as a whole and the local council to recognize the arts as a viable career option and as essential for community building. Dave, who's the head of the organization, elaborated that it's not just playing the guitars, it's getting involved in community stuff, and it's the social side. And that's kind of their mantra, really. The project with Soundwave will involve using research to demonstrate, particularly to the council, music's capabilities as a career, as I mentioned, and more importantly, a mode of building community and reviving these high streets. The research side of this would involve writing up qualitative findings, but also sponsoring events, documenting change, and hopefully developing sort of a collaboration with my university to help get their students to basically visit universities and maybe have the opportunity for a scholarship of some sort. And once Soundwave's new building opens, we'll be documenting the change in the city center. I think some specific white papers could also document this positive social change and make a case for, again, this arts-based deindustrialization strategy. The other work would be advocating directly with local businesses to show the value of non-musical competencies that arise from doing music activities, demonstrating how encouraging arts could also help with employability skills and success in addition to this community building. Soundwave has also noted that they had difficulty getting a seat around the table at council events. As such, this project would be trying to advocate for them with regards to the West Cumbria cultural strategy. While this is still in its development phases, the non-musical competencies this project will focus on is social and active citizenship through its advocacy for arts employment. It will also be part of my broader research goals to develop mechanisms for tracking community impact of music activities. So, conclude. Cohesive Harmonies, through its program of experimental music interventions, explores how community music-based activities can be deployed to facilitate active citizenship, non-musical competencies, shared identities, and social cohesion. Each sub-project focuses on a different method or context for investigating these. Looking at the first design framework of researcher-led interventions, the Virtual Harmonies project explored social cohesion in an online space that was at the same time quite place-specific in that the participants were from across Bradford's cultural groups. The Bradford Dole project continued with this place-based context, this time focusing on how a multiculturally and locally relevant musical instrument could aid in cohesion building, as well as developing other non-musical competencies such as English language usage and confidence. With regards to the second design framework of organization-driven initiatives, the Dorset Music Service project is in the context of schools and how music activities can be used to improve well-being behavior in an educational setting. Finally, the collaboration with Soundwave is in the context of an isolated community preparing for deindustrialization and arts-based initiatives developed to address this, as well as to assist in reviving the high street to increase social cohesion and developing mechanisms to track impact of in-school activities outside the classroom. While the Cohesive Harmonies project as a whole is still in progress, its initiatives are constantly looking to map music's capacity for activating non-musical competencies and engagement with research that focuses upon locally envisaged music interventions, projects informed by the needs of particular places that demonstrate an array of ways in which music can contribute to societal health and well-being. I would like to try to remember how to share audio and play this video for you to finish my presentation. So I might need you to tell me if you can hear this and then figure out what happens if you can't. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay.
We can't hear that. There is a technique we learned and then we forgot. Chen or anyone knows how to play the audio video at the same time?
I think I might have done it. Hang on.
Got it?
Let's see.
Okay.
Can you hear that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. I've done it then. All right, here you go.
Living in the air, amongst the clouds, amongst the rain, landing only to nest then, they travel again, flying fast like the whispers of grass, you see blowing in the wind at such incredible speed. Imagine that freedom to cross borders and not need documents to proceed. Imagine that freedom to breathe, to rest and breed in a place they find safe. Then the free will to leave.
Peaceful souls circling the skies, pausing in hope to birth, feed and nurture.
Peaceful souls circling the sky, pausing in hope to birth, feed and nurture.
She may appear slight to the human eye, but flying high, so high, she is the queen of the sky. Fork-tailed queen of the skies, weathering all storms,
Working out your inner strength, unknown, arduous journey, take off, landless, eat, sleep, mate mid-flight, purpose, heart, endless yearning, turning, reeling, swooping, soaring spirit, talking, pausing, reassuring, liberating, freedom, full flight. Breathe, breathe.
the flying high,
Offering
so high,
bird's eye
she's the queen of the sky.
the whole world is her home. The whole world is her home.
Unknown, arduous journey. Take off, landless. Sleep. Mate, mid-flight. Purpose, heart, endless yearning. Turning, wheeling,
Wistful
sweeping.
souls,
Soaring
circling
spirit.
pausing in hope to bird.
Talking,
From a
pausing,
bird's eye perspective,
reassuring.
The sky,
the whole world is
Liberating,
there.
weathering
freedom,
storm
full flight.
to find her one.
Breathe, breathe.
Peaceful souls circling the skies, pausing in hope to birth, feed and nurture.
Working out your inner strength, unknown, arduous journey. Take off, landless, eat, sleep, mate, mid-flight,
When they
purpose,
sleep,
heart,
do they dream?
endless yearnings,
What do they
turning,
dream of?
wheeling,
Do their
swooping,
thighs like wings
soaring
become
spirit,
stronger and more capable
talking,
of miraculous
pausing,
leaps?
reassuring, liberating, freedom,
Soaring
full
spirit.
flight, breathe.
Talking, pausing, reassuring. Liberating, freedom, full flight.
So high.
Breathe,
She's the queen of the sky.
breathe.
Thank you very much. Oops, mom.
Thank you so much, Stanley. Can I ask everybody to turn your camera on so that thank you so much for your lovely presentation with the fascinating research projects and the outcome. Before I abuse my chair and take the advantage, I would ask everybody to ask the questions. So if I have got so many questions, but
Okay.
if that is already been asked, I'm not going to. And if there is any rest, I will do towards the end. Nice to see you, Jane. So has anyone any question?
I do have a question based on our experience. Arts-based projects that we know have so much value like this, that part of the value is in being able to maintain the momentum and the relationships and the partnerships over time, and to build confidence, in allowing participants to build confidence and develop skills. And the constant challenge we find with that is just short-term project funding models, you know, finding ways to move past that so that projects are sustainable. Yeah, that's kind of the hardest bit, I reckon, in all of that.
Yeah.
Have you found any models in your experience where you've been able to really see that continue, that momentum over time?
Well, not easily. I mean, and that's kind of why I've started to, I'm going to start leaning into that second approach I mentioned, with working with an organization where we're going to create, the second approach will be more geared towards working with an organization that they're already kind of doing something that would just benefit from me inputting to what they're doing, and they have the expertise there to carry it forward. So that is, I'm hoping that is a better way for this to keep going. Like the first two I mentioned, I mean, there is some continuity, and like I worked with the same group a few times, and I know both of those groups well, but I haven't been able, for example, to get them funding to give them 20 doldrums. And also 20 doldrums take up a lot of space, and most of these, they don't tend to work in their own space. They have a space that they go to for the day. So, for example, the SBC group works out of University of Bradford, but they don't. So there's, I'd say I was able to present some findings to them so that they know, like, actually drumming's a really great activity, for example, for their participants. And I've told them I can come back in, but they do so many other things as part of their remit that it's more just like taking the positive bits that I contributed to that they can put in their activities going forward. But again, yeah, it is a problem. I mean, in terms of funding, my project is now supported by my university as not with much money at all, like a couple £1,000, but as an impact case study for our research framework. So I can at least get to some of these places without paying for it, and that's about as good as I'm gonna get. But they did buy the drums, so I mean, I'd say most of my stuff has come from university support. But yeah, it is a problem. It is a bit of a problem.
I have a practical question, I suppose.
Okay.
If one were to try and run a similar collaborative online program, do you have any particular recommendations for the things you should or shouldn't do? I can see this having great application, particularly in a state as big as WA, where people are, often very spread out and spatially, geographically isolated. And
Yeah.
we also work with lots of, older people who have limited mobility. But I suppose just thinking generally about online collaborative processes of creation, are there any things you'd say we should or shouldn't do?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I condensed that pretty a lot for the purposes of this presentation. So I have written a bit about that before. Yeah, I mean, the main thing is just acknowledging that you can't do any of this simultaneously. Like, you can't really sing together effectively. So a lot of that was done by, we put as I said, there was a focus in each session, and each session we had like a get together where we had a warm up, and then we sent people into randomly allocated breakout rooms with 2 or 3 people in them and said, okay, create a melody and then come back and share this melody. The melody, by the way, was created by, I'm not sure if you can visualize this, but tuned chime bars. Like, you can get like these kids chime bars. They're about this big and they're colorful and they're like the C scale. And we sent each participant one of those before the session. And so when we put them into groups, they had to come up with a melody using those 2 chime bars. And then they recorded it on their phones, and they sent it to us, and we put it together in like using Ableton, I think. So a lot of it was developing things in the session, but then having them go away and record it and send it. You could do, and then as you could see, like, I call it a songwriting workshop, but some of it was more spoken word, and it was just acknowledging, and then we pieced together them recording the bit that they were going to sing or speak in there. So and then we always planned way too much. Like, we could only ever get through about a quarter because it just takes a lot longer online. I have also done some stuff with, not as part of this project, but with a part of another, with working in remotely with a dementia care home. And that was doing free improvisation workshops. So like musical free improvisation. I don't know if you're familiar with it or have done it before. But it's essentially like creating a soundscape on the spot in responding to each other, and that was really easy to do online. And even there was always like someone in the room with the participants, because I guess someone who supervised activities at the dementia care home. But we basically like said, okay, let's pretend we're at the seaside and make some noises. We're walking down the boardwalk. And so it was almost like, I would call it like maybe a sort of guided meditation, but where we're going to play sounds along with it. And that worked really well online, and they really liked it. It was a really beautiful activity. I probably have a lot more, so hopefully that's at least something.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. First of all, why DOE?
Oh, yeah. So it is. Yeah. So it's because my project partner. Well, okay. So first of all, while I did songwriting as my first thing, I'm a percussionist and not a singer. So I was already looking for ways that I could maybe move more into my my musical comfort zone in delivering activities. And I play a lot of different world percussion instruments. What I didn't mention was my project partner from at Leeds Beckett University is a Punjabi Sikh, British Punjabi Sikh man who lives in Bradford, and so this was a collaboration we developed together. But it's the dole is like it's difficult to explain what Bradford's like without going there. It's Bradford has the largest Pakistani diaspora, I think, in the UK. It's 25% of the population describes themselves as Pakistani, and a lot of them are from the Punjabi region of Pakistan. But then there's also a huge Sikh population and a pretty sizable Indian Hindu population as well as it's Bangladeshi. So it's an instrument that like is a part of the city. And it crosses so many of those groups that we just thought it would be a really interesting one to use for that, just because of the resonances it had with so many communities. And like during the wedding season, which is like I think around March to September or late September, like you can't walk through the city center without hearing like the dole that's being used for the wedding to welcome like the groom and the bride to like the reception and that kind of thing. It's a huge part of the soundscape. And then because of that, it's often used like if we're having like a city, any event in the city is gonna that the city government's putting on is gonna involve a dole troupe because they're trying to represent all of the different cultures that live there. So it just seemed like an instrument that would resonate with the people that we were working with in a lot of different ways.
We have two dolls in my community from Bangladesh in Perth. And we actually struggle to store that two dolls because they are cumbersome, big.
Yes.
It's big. It's huge. I could show you some other day some photos from my community. It's huge. How did you get that many dolls? How did you manage? And these are expensive.
We cheated a little bit in that. So we bought 4 professional dolls, which are the big ones that you have. But then we bought like 18 of like medium-sized ones, which are still like representative and they sound like them, but they are they're a lot less cumbersome. They're still kind of cumbersome, but they're maybe like this big versus like this big. And they're a lot lighter, which means that the participants could hold them, because the professional ones, as you probably know, are also a little bit heavy, especially if you're short, as I am. So that's kind of how we got around that. They are a bit expensive, and we brought them over from India. We ordered them from India, but that was from getting a university grant to get them. So.
Another practical question I have, or theoretical, how did you? I know you mentioned about interviews and surveys, but how did you actually measure identity, cohesion, inclusion, community engagement? Did you?
Well, it's more been about, for those first 2, just like how people were reflecting on the workshops, like just saying like, oh, I felt closer. I mean, and a lot of them in the interviews were describing like their identity. I mean, I gave just like one example about how the one of the women had sort of felt it as part of her culture, being in a village in Pakistan, and another reflected, which I didn't include, was reflecting on how it was a big part of any community events that they did, and like being used on henna nights and that kind of thing. So it was I kind of just I think measuring it is not really a good word for it. It was and it's something, the measurement bit of it is something that I'm trying to develop a bit better in this research, because measuring is difficult in this. But it was more just talking to people and basing it on how they described themselves, how they described how they felt after the workshop, how they filled in the surveys, that kind of thing. But and the two projects I'm developing still, I'm working on still, that's a big part of it is trying to develop a better way of measuring it. And I'm working with some people in like in our education school to try to get some ideas of how that could cross over.
The reason I mentioned about measuring that is because I'm also from health background, and try to understand that how to convince the funding body from health, how to convince them because all are through scale, everything. And whether you are happy or satisfied, it has to be a scale.
Yeah. I haven't used the scale per se with this yet, because I forget what the scale's called. There is a scale you can put out there. I would say I'm trying to collaborate with people also in our School of Public Health. I've been working a bit with them as well to try to develop a better way of demonstrating this. Because right now, I just, as a qualitative researcher, what I have is I interview a lot of people and I send out surveys. And I have some creative ways of doing the surveys, like not in the training that you attended, Mananita, but in the other trainings I did. One of the things I used was giving, and these were with the Musicians Without Borders participants, not with, actually, I have done this with, I did this with the Dole group as well. I used postcards. And on the postcards, because so as you maybe can tell from my accent, I'm not from the UK, I'm from the US. I've lived in the UK for 15 years, and I've traveled a lot since being there. And everywhere I go, I buy a postcard or four, and I never send them because I'm lazy. I just like getting the postcards. So I've used the postcards in these events as a sometimes both a pre and a post survey. And on the postcard, it's got two different sides, right? I write two different questions on it, and it's usually like trying to remember if I got an example anywhere. I think I got one on an iPad. It's kind of would be like your typical what you'd ask someone afterwards if you were wanting more than a yes or no question. Just trying to see if I've got an example from the trainings. Yeah, so for the Musicians Without Borders training, I asked them two questions. One was relating to your practice and this training, what's important to you right now? So quite open-ended things. And then the other one was, can you identify a specific area for your development? I'm not quite sure where the example from the Dole trainings are, but it was something like, what do you know about the Dole right now? And or what did you know about the Dole before you got here? And how are you feeling about this right now? Do you and I think I've also asked them, like, do you feel like this brought you closer? And what you get is, instead of just like little dry answers that you get a normal survey, people often write it like it is a postcard to you, and you get some really, really lovely stories that can come out of it. That's where this, like, the story about the henna night came from, for example, which was really beautiful.
That's creative.
Yeah.
That's creative. Loretta.
Thank you so much for that. I just really loved it. And when you shared the musical creation, it's just such a different level of engagement, isn't it? Even for the audience to hear about the work. But I have a question about the digital tools that you mentioned. Like, I think you said you are in one of your projects was assisted by some simple songwriting technology or something like that. I'm just really curious to hear more about that and how well that worked, or if you have any concerns about that as well. Yeah.
So in that, we just sort of gave them examples of how to use it. So it's so with Dorset Music Service, they have like an online platform that all of the schools who are within there, which are gosh, what would you call them? I would call them public schools in the US, but that's not the same thing in the UK. It's like comprehensive state schools kind of thing. So all of the state schools have access to this tool, the set of software that they have. And one of them is a really simple songwriting software where teachers can use it to have like students record lyrics into, and then they can arrange music based on like a digital keyboard and that kind of thing. I forget what it's called now, but I could find it. And the good thing about that is it's not, from a safeguarding perspective, it's a platform that is contained within the school system, so you don't have like outside people able to get into it. There's also like a really simple DAW, like digital audio workstation, that they've got access to in there as well. So again, that like students can create beats by literally tapping on the keyboard, and then that translates into there, and then they can use it to piece it together. But that's one I've not actually used in a workshop yet, but we've told people about it. So I think that's going to be part of, I have a feeling that that's going to be something that we've told them how to use it, and they are maybe not that comfortable with it. So it will be something that is part of then the follow-up of helping them develop something really quite specific that could go along with that. But I could get you the name. I think one of the softwares is called Charanga, possibly. But I could get you the name of those softwares. I just need to go and look through my notes. I don't have access to Dorset Music Services Systems, not being an employee there. So, but I can ask.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It was more about like what it's like to have that dimension in the project. I mean, obviously students are really capable, and so they quickly, like, they're digital natives, but I just wondered if you'd had experience with integrating that kind of technology into the intervention, and if it is fluid, or if you've found it also challenging. But yeah,
I mean,
it was more sort of that angle.
Yeah, I mean, in my impression of it, as long as you're comfortable using it, then it's fine. But if you're sort of like trying to read off a sheet while because as long as you're comfortable using it, and you can keep it flowing, and the students don't like just start playing on their phones or doing something else, then it's fine. But if you're getting ahead of your skis and like reading off the instruction paper by being, okay, what does this do? Then I think you probably lose them. But yeah, I mean, in my experience, as long as you know what you're going to do with it, and you are only using the bits that you know. A lot of times, like, you can then just hand it off to them, and as you said, they will know how to use it better than you in like 2 minutes. So
that's my experience. I'm going through. It's really, really useful insight, actually. Thank you, because you make me think of when I've taught like software support, qualitative software program like NVivo. I'm at step 4, going through it methodically, and they're already at step 8. Because it just makes sense. It's intuitive.
Yeah. But that would be my thing. Don't get ahead of the skis, and teach what you know, and then find a place to hand it over to them, and they'll do something amazing, basically.
Fascinating. Rumen, do you have any question? I think Rumen is the first time we have ever got someone from WAPA. I think
not at the moment. I'm just happy to listen to the conversation. Thank you.
Welcome.
Maybe we should explain what WAPA is for our speaker.
Exactly.
WAPA is we're very excited to have Rumen here, because WAPA is our Australian Academy of Performing Arts, and
cool.
They're very famous in Australia, and are kind of So yes, and we know Rumen, that some of your colleagues, maybe you're involved as well, do have a community music. Maybe it's an undergraduate unit or something. Is this ringing any bells for you?
Not really. I just started my PhD a month ago, so I'm very fresh to this, and I'm connected as well with the Center for People, Planet, and Places with Justin, who perhaps So she brought me on board with the network, and I'm still kind of getting to know my way around. But quite excited about kind of
Yeah.
the borders, bringing the creative arts, and I look forward to hearing more about Tinley's work and other people as well.
Cool.
Great to have you here, as Mononita said. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to imagine what city WAPA was, so thank you for that.
I mean, WAPA has a worldwide reputation, actually. So it's not only in India. And is that Hugh Roberts from graduated from WAPA? Is that Hugh?
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman.
Oh, Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And also, we've named a theatre after him. He was the Joker in the Batman movie.
Heath
but
Ledger?
he unfortunately,
Heath
Ledger.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, the Joker. There were some other people who joined, but they had to leave. So they wrote some comments I would love to read. Tenley. From Lukash, great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. Unfortunately, I need to leave, join another meeting in a few minutes. Kat had a question, but she had to leave as well. KU, she had to leave as well. Thank you so much for your presentation. I cannot stay for the discussion, but a wonderful example of community engagement and music. Thank you. Dr. Jane Malcock, she had a question, but she also had to leave. Thank you for sharing your work. It is great to hear how these projects work in other parts of the world. We have also been working with an applied ethnomusicologist who is working on the revival of Noongar language and dance on country
cool.
through research funds. Isn't it great?
That's cool. Very cool.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I mean, I do not want to take any more time if we do not have any questions, but I would like to share and actually ask Tenley, because when I was in Leeds for the 5-day training, Tenley